ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I am doing fantastic because, Blake, this is an awesome weekend of college football that we've got coming up.
Separation Saturday.
Absolutely. I had this thought, by the way. I can't remember in a 3-week span having 2 weeks with this many important matchups. I get that we had last week where it was that kind of slow buffer and it ended up being really exciting, but I can't remember having this amount of big premier games that are going to affect standings and are going to be extremely highly watched across the country. I can't remember the last time that something like this happened.
The biggest lie ever told in American history. It's not JFK. It's not did we land on the moon. It is that when people say that there are down weeks in college football, it is the biggest lie in American history, and I can't be convinced otherwise. I cannot. Did we land on the moon? Did we get past the radiation belt? None of that matters. There is never a slow week in college football. And, Joe, by the way, an explosive week this upcoming week. Does John Mateer play in the Red River Shootout? We only call it the shootout here. Who knows? Can Hawkins and company find a way? Our good friends over at FanDuel believe that Texas is actually going to win the game. They are favored over Oklahoma. Oregon and Indiana. Joe, is Indiana legit? Are the Indiana Hoosiers actually legit? Because here's the real truth that nobody wants to admit. Has Curt Cignetti at Indiana got a signature win yet? Now, maybe you could say Michigan last year, but not to this level. We'll talk about that game too. And oh, by the way, Bama and Mizzou. One of the most intriguing games of the season. Can Eli Drinkwitz and company put a stamp down on the SEC and say, hey, buddy, we're here?
Well, and the other thing, too, I know that we're obviously not talking about the games I'm about to mention. There are a lot of intriguing games that are going to be talked about in tomorrow's show when we get to Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan, right? USC is going to be a really big one. But specifically for today, Blake, I really think that we're going to get a chance to dig into what is going to help Alabama really truly establish themselves in what's going to be a challenging matchup for them. What's really going to help Oregon prove that just because Penn State sucks, that victory on the road in Happy Valley is still extremely, extremely important and is a great example of who they are as a team. And I got to be honest with you, one thing though, I don't really know what the hell to make of this Oklahoma versus Texas matchup as you led into. I really don't have a strong sense of how this game is going to play. I have a lean in the direction of which team I think is going to win the game, but you've got Hawkins in without Mateer.
Allegedly.
Likely. Yeah, it doesn't seem everyone's very optimistic that Mateer is going to play. And if Arch plays too, well, that's kind of part of my point. And as much as we could write off Arch and say Arch isn't going to play well, what are the chances that they don't just come out and pull what Florida just did to them? So there's just so much unpredictability with that specific game, which is part of what makes that rivalry so chaotic.
Speaking of that, did you see Mike Elko today at the podium? They got Florida this week. I got to be real with you. Texas A&M versus Florida to me is a massive matchup this upcoming week. Joe, I mean, he took shots at Notre Dame. I tagged you in it. Did you see it?
I did, and I don't agree with that. I think Notre Dame's more talented than Florida is.
I actually kind of agree with you. I don't know how far off they are, though. And I'm just going to say this again. I really do believe the more talented team won in Gainesville last week. I know you hate me saying that, but I really do believe that.
I don't completely agree with that. I think that there are plenty of deficiencies that
run game, Florida, O-line, Florida, receivers, Florida, quarterback, Florida. I mean, name an offense, tight end, Florida. I
wouldn't say tight end for Florida. I think that a healthy Texas team is a better running back room. I also think that
they won't run
pass
the ball.
Rush. There's better linebackers for Texas. I think that they're relatively even. I think that there's a slight edge for Texas in my book.
Maybe you're right. We're going to find out this week versus Oklahoma in the Red River Shootout. So we got lots and lots to discuss. Joe, everybody needs us to do a massive favor, though, for the both of us. Mm-hmm. If you haven't done so already, go over to our Facebook page, Ruffino and Joe Show. We just launched a Facebook page, all of our reels. You can go to TikTok. We're really close to hitting a massive goal over there on TikTok, so go over there as well. But go over there. Also, if you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. And as you always know, do us a favor and hit the like and share wherever you are listening. Before we do get rolling, though, every episode of Ruffino and Joe's brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. If you have the discretionary income, Joe and I both humbly ask that you go there. Let's go have some fun together. There's some massive games this week that are coming up in week 7 of college football. You can go over there and place those bets. There's Monday Night Football tonight as well that you can go place on it. The number one place to do it is our good friends over at FanDuel. If you got any thoughts, questions, concerns, you don't know really what you're doing, go to FanDuel.com/RG for more details. But every episode of Ruffino and Joe is brought to you by our great friends over at FanDuel. All right, everybody hit the like and share. Joe, let's get moving. Let's get rolling into this. Oregon versus Indiana this weekend, both coming off, or Oregon at least. I think Indiana's coming off a bye week as well, if I'm not mistaken here. But
I believe so.
Both teams coming off 2 performances. Indiana's over Illinois, Oregon's over Penn State. A lot of traction going in to this one. Oregon is the favorite over on FanDuel when you go and look at those odds. But, Joe, when you look at Oregon versus Indiana and you preview this game, how do you see it playing out?
Oregon on FanDuel is favored at -7.5, by the way. For anyone
opened up at 10.5. Hold on. I tweeted this last week. Open up. FanDuel did one game, week 7 matchup. It was this one. The line has moved 3 points. That's significant. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, very, very interesting, and it should provide a little bit of juice for Oregon supporters for wanting to bet on them. Blake, I think that first and foremost, it's very important that this game is played in Autzen. I think that this is huge for Oregon having that home environment to play to their strength. And last time that we watched them have a Midwestern team come into that environment, it was when Ohio State stepped in, and the noise seemingly got to Ohio State in the very late stages of that game. Blake, this Oregon team, to me, has another opportunity to really prove why they're one of the top 3 teams in the country alongside Miami and Ohio State. The biggest challenge to start off with me that I want to find out is how they're going to handle facing off with a potent passing attack like Fernando Mendoza, Omar Cooper, and Elijah Surratt, because they were not challenged. Their secondary was not challenged when they faced off with Penn State. But one thing that we do know for certain is that Oregon starts fast, and that is going to give them a tremendous advantage. They have a plus 44 point differential in the first quarter of all of their games this season. And whoever can strike first with a big play, I think, is going to give themselves a quick early edge towards a game that is going to be extremely exciting to watch.
Autzen is arguably one of, if not the, I'm not going to say it's the, but by far one of the hardest places to play and come out with a win. It's not even debatable. Like you mentioned, you saw Ohio State going there last year, and Joe, that place was absolutely rocking. It's going to be rocking again this weekend. But you brought up Indiana and what they needed to do. What is the quickest way to keep that noise down? Joe, you got to establish a run game up front, and you got to be very personable about it. The question I have, Joe, and Oregon fans are going to yell at me. By the way, Oregon's my top team, by the way, in my power rankings. Just throwing that out there before you say I hate you, because I don't.
Okay.
Indiana is 5th in the country in rushing. They've had multitudes of 300-yard-plus rushing games against Illinois, against all the other teams they played. Blake, they didn't play anybody. You're right. How do they look in this one? And the second question I ask, Joe, if there is a chink that I want to see Oregon answer, is their run defense. Well, Blake, they've been fine. I agree. They've actually been more than fine. But, Joe, they're 38th in the country in rushing. You want to get that crowd noise down early, convert easy third downs. When I look at Indiana, by the way, on third down offense, they're 4th in the country. Joe, over half, 65% of their third down conversions is coming on the ground, more or less than what people believe of what Fernando Mendoza and company have been doing. But the question is, listen, you went up against Illinois. It was a great test, and you answered that call. You played some opponents earlier in the year that, quite frankly, did not have the talent to match up with you. Joe, my question for Indiana coming into this one is, can you match what they're going to do to you up front on both lines of scrimmage that have been very dominant in Oregon?
I think one thing that's very intriguing for this game is that just pulling up some of their more advanced stats, both these teams are incredibly evenly matched in terms of EPA per drop back. We've got Oregon, who's 10th, and Indiana's defense is 22nd. So there's not much separation. EPA per rush, we've seen Oregon have a lot of production. They're 10th in the country, while Indiana's defense against them is in the top 25. We are seeing that both of these teams are operating on just this ridiculous trajectory for how productive they've been. One thing that I give Indiana a lot of credit for is how underrated they are defensively. We saw the way that Indiana's offense was able to take advantage of Illinois' secondary when it was banged up, but not a lot of people talked about how smothering Indiana's defense was against Illinois. They are the number one team in the country in havoc rate, which measures tackles for loss, turnovers, those types of plays that are registered. They are the best team in the country right now at creating those opportunities. Meanwhile, Oregon is 90th. So they have not really been having those game-shifting types of plays defensively. The other thing about Indiana that really intrigues me is, one, their leading tacklers, their best defensive players, are all seniors and juniors. That gives them an advantage in this area, that veteran leadership that they're bringing to the table. They're also, this is a pretty crazy stat, they have only allowed 3 red zone trips to opponents this season. So they're not really letting many teams get very far down
and
the
what's
field.
so funny about that, both of them have allowed touchdowns, 3 apiece. They're both tied at 127th in red zone defense.
Yeah. Wait, you're
yeah.
saying that they've given up conversions when teams have gone to the red zone?
Both Indiana and Oregon have allowed 3 touchdowns in the red zone. 3. They're both tied at 127th in red zone.
Because of the percentage that they've given up.
Because of the percentage of it being 100%, they're tied for dead last. Here's the problem with that. Between the both of them through 7 weeks, they only have 6 red zone appearances between the defense combined. That's the issue here. It's not because they're bad, because you look at it, you talked about their defense. One's 3rd in the country in scoring defense. The other is tied for 6th. So if that's the worst thing they do,
right,
somebody's got to get to the red zone and let them convert.
Speaking of red zone efficiency, this was another insane stat for Oregon. They're 100% this year in the red zone. Yeah. 23 possessions that they've reached there. So there's going to be a little bit of a breaking point. If we're talking, though, just like very directly on like how I think this game,
they're number 1 in the country, right?
Yeah, how this game is going to actually unfold. You've got 2 tremendous quarterbacks, and I'm going to really focus on the 2 of them because both teams have solid offensive linemen. They've got great receivers. They've got good running backs they can lean on. They've got underrated defensive players that are making a lot of big plays. But this game is going to be defined by Dante Moore versus Fernando Mendoza. And as we saw when Dante Moore had his last quarterback battle against Drew Aller, he prevailed. He survived. He was the one who made the big plays every single time that he was called upon and needed to do so. And Mendoza was awesome against Illinois, struggled a tiny bit against Iowa. Is that version of him against Illinois going to be the one that shows up? I have a high aspirations, very, very high aspirations for what Mendoza does. I really believe that he is going to be a top 10 pick, just like if Dante Moore were to declare that he will also be a top 10 pick. I, first and foremost, as an enjoyer of good football, am so geeked up on the fact that we get to watch these 2 dudes go after one another and potentially go shot for shot.
See, you bring up the quarterbacks, and I'm glad that you did, because I look, at Indiana, and I look at their passing defense. They're 7th in the country in pass defense and passing yards allowed. My question is, name a team that could even remotely test that. I don't think that there's a team that remotely comes close to having athletes like Sadiq, DeCorian Moore. They get Hill involved in the run game out of the backfield, who I think is a problem. I don't know. I really don't know if Indiana, and I mean this, has the level of speed that can combat what Oregon's about to throw at them. Now, they don't.
No, I disagree. I mean,
like that. They don't. They don't.
I disagree. No. I disagree with that because
Of course you disagree. They ain't got that level of speed.
You're completely underrating Indiana's secondary because Indiana's secondary has some of the best defensive backs in the country.
Okay, and name a team that's been able to go up and match up against that secondary that can throw the ball like what they're about to do.
But that just because they haven't been challenged by anyone doesn't mean that they're not good. I will put a lot of faith in Amari Farrell and D'Angelo Pons and what they're going to be able to accomplish against this unit. I wouldn't discount them. They're one of the most talented secondaries in college football.
And I'm going to lean on Sadiq, and I'm going to lean on DeCorian Moore in that wide receiver room because, listen, I saw them go up against a really talented secondary and have a massive amounts of success. So before we even go there, I get what you're saying. So when I look at Indiana, it's not a question of if, it's really a question of can you? Because I think that you have not, even though you've been fantastic, you made it to a playoff, whatever. I don't think that you've gotten that signature win to show the country that we're actually here. Their playoff run a year ago was people, hold on. Last year was everybody wondering if they deserved to be in. You beat Michigan. But then when you went up against the ranked teams that you played, whether it be Notre Dame, Ohio State, you got pushed around up front. And that is a bottom line fact. Joe, when I think of a signature win, I don't know if there would be another one than going on the road to the last year's Big Ten champion and beating them. I got to be real with you. I think Dante Moore in this wide receiver room is about to show up and show out. I think Will Stein is going to have so many different things that he's going to throw at them that they're just not going to be ready for. And I saw a very young unit hit a stride in the second half versus Penn State and shell shock them. I'm telling you, do not sleep on DeCorian.
I'm not sleeping on him, Blake. But here's the thing that you're like completely again. We're overlooking the talent that Indiana has in their secondary, and I would argue Indiana's winning against Illinois is actually possibly more impressive than the Penn State victory at this current moment because Penn State is a complete and utter mess right now. Illinois is still ranked right now.
They won't be long. They won't be for long.
I don't know about that.
Okay, so then you have them beating Ohio State. Else, all of y'all.
No. That's not what I said. Just because they lose to Ohio State does not mean they end up getting taken out of the rankings. You're almost making it seem like I'm framing this as if I'm doubting Oregon. I think Oregon wins this football game, and I'm taking them to win. But I don't think that is where the real challenge.
Okay, well then where's the challenge? Because if they win, there's going to have to be a challenge that Indiana can't overcome. And if it's not in the pass game, then you think that they're going to run all over them, which I don't know if they're going to be able to do because I got to be quite frank with you. On the opposite side of that, I don't know if Oregon is going to have the explosiveness from the run game that many people think that they have. I really think that their biggest strength is starting to find the connection through the pass game that people aren't really talking about enough.
I don't disagree with that. And it was.
So you don't disagree with
me? Stop. I don't disagree with that. Dante Moore and DeCorian Moore and the passing attack are not important for this matchup. And I'm not saying that they get completely shut down, but the way that I see that this game unfolding, and I think that where success could be found and will be found for Oregon is actually them running the football. You've got a running back room that is averaging 6.8 yards per carry and a running back room that was so talented with Dyer Hill Jr. and Jordan Davidson. Those guys have been so good that it led to Mekhi Hughes requesting his red shirt. You put him in a very awkward position that he decided that he wasn't going to play this year. And I just named two guys that are freshmen that are contributing when you still have Jaden Lamar and Noah Whittington. There is a 4-deep group. I think that the way that they've been able to sneakily build through big rushing plays is where they potentially find that impact because Indiana's secondary, as I'm trying to really harp on here, is super, super underrated. If anything, I think that the way that they were able to move the ball against Indiana's defense, having the solid front seven that they had, is evidence. Or sorry, I'm mixing it. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Is evidence that they're going to end up having success here against Indiana.
Let me flip side of that, since we talked about one secondary and one pass game unit. I really like the physicality and the physical nature of what Indiana receivers brought against Illinois. However, you got dudes everywhere for Oregon in the secondary. My question is going to be, can Fernando Mendoza hit those big shots like Drew Aller did? Because I think that there was something that did get exposed. You had a blown coverage. It went for a touchdown. It is what it is. Can you hit more of those? I got to see Fernando Mendoza in this wide receiver room go up against that secondary and have success. Joe, you're talking about the fifth secondary in the country in Oregon, who quite honestly has been a no-fly zone. They had one big play. Thieneman comes down with the interception in overtime. I really do wonder if they're going to have massive amounts of success. And I do also wonder, with that being said, can Indiana protect Fernando Mendoza long enough to be able to get the ball downfield and throw the ball downfield? When I talk about, I don't know if Indiana's been challenged to what they're going to be challenged. Well, first off, they haven't. And I think that's just very apparent. But I would heat this thing up this weekend. I would make Fernando very uncomfortable early if I'm Oregon, and I'm going man up on the outside and say, okay, look, early, I'm going to make you beat us. And then if you do, then we'll adjust. But I'm going after Fernando Mendoza like my life depended on it. I think he's going to make a lot of elite throws. I'm not saying he won't. But I got to see this wide receiver room who's very physical and talented with 7-11 and the boys, or Waffle House and the boys. I keep calling them 7-11. With Surratt, who I like a lot, I need to see them overcome that. Listen, do I think Indiana has the potential and may be a very good team? Yes. I got to see you go in there and do it first for me. I really do, because I think Illinois, when you lost 4 DBs and you started throwing the ball all over the place, that's good.
But they stopped throwing the ball like a little bit after halftime, and they still beat them.
So I'm sorry, but doing that to Illinois is not the same for what we're about to see.
Obviously, I just don't like you framing it as them. They haven't been tested. Like they
haven't been tested.
They smoked Illinois, and then they beat Iowa on the road. And
to be honest with you, Iowa still doesn't really know how to confidently throw a pass forwards. And
I watched one of the better defenses in college football, and they were still able to.
Joe, I'm sorry.
That game.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Iowa doesn't have a pulse. I'm sorry. No, they're not. They don't have the dudes that Oregon does. No, they don't.
Obviously, that's not what I'm saying here. I think that two things can be true here. We can talk about this matchup and talk about how this game is, but I don't like this framing that Indiana hasn't been tested. This isn't the schedule that they played last year. They have seen more challenging games. Is this the most challenging game that they've played? Yeah. Is it also the most challenging game that Oregon's played? Both apply for both of these teams. It's week 7. Not many teams have played hard parts of their schedule. I
still think going to Happy Valley and a whiteout at night is going to be more difficult than playing at home, but I get what you're saying.
I give Oregon a lot of credit for stepping into that really, really hard environment. But at the current moment, Illinois looks like a better team than Penn State does based on the way that Penn State played against UCLA this past weekend. Is Penn State more talented? Yeah. It's not better coached at the current moment because they've been playing like complete and utter shit over the past 2 weeks. So I just don't like using the framing of those last 2 matchups to define who has been more challenged and who's more prepared for this game. But with that in mind, though, I think that you brought up one other part about this that is very important, and it's very specific in the quarterback battle that we're talking about. You have Cooper and you have Surratt, who are 2 very physical, sturdy receivers who are combined for 53 catches and 820 yards through their 5 games. They're going up against what is a young corner core for this Oregon team. They have been tremendous. They've played very, very well. But as much as we're talking about who's been tested to this point, what receivers really tested this secondary when they played against Penn State? I'm not saying that as a dig. I'm merely pointing out that for some of these things that we deem strengths for both these squads, I think this game allows for us to really define who is the better squad.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I still think Penn State, for what it's worth, there's a couple of things for me that I'm looking at. Let's just agree. You can agree to disagree. It doesn't really matter. I don't know if Indiana can do some of the things that they did to Illinois up front. So that's number one.
I agree with that.
Okay, that's number one for me. I don't know how the level of speed. I from my eyeballs tell me when I look at Oregon, they have more speed than Indiana. That's what my eyeballs tell me. Now, are there specific players that Indiana has that's got really great speed, elite speed? Yes. I don't know if they have the overall team speed. That's what I see when I watch the film of them. Number three, I think they're going to heat up Fernando Mendoza. And I really think that they are going to tell him and tell this team, okay, fine, early, throw the ball all over the place and see if you can beat us, because we're not going to let you run the ball. Joe, they've been running the ball for 300 yards a game against some no-name of Kennesaw State. Okay, so sounds good. I think that they have the talent to – I don't like the matchup for Indiana at all. I don't. Because I think the biggest strengths of what Indiana has shown is also the biggest strengths for Oregon. And I think that they're going to outmatch you there. And I got to be real with you. Illinois was a great test, quote unquote, if we're going to go that route, to see if you got better up front. When you win these games last year, you got manhandled. And Joe, I got to be real with you. I think it's going to be a little bit like that in the second half, because I think that the depth of Oregon is going to start taking over here, and it's going to start overwhelming them. And I think Fernando is going to have issues in the second half. And I'm not saying they're getting blown out or anything like that, but I do think that this is going to be a pretty convincing win for Oregon.
I think you're like really forcing me to make it seem like I'm completely shitting on Oregon by saying
you hate Oregon.
No. Well, I just realized I was wearing my hat with the Oregon logo on it. Two things here. One, Illinois' front seven was their strength going into that game. Gabe Yakis, Thompson, who is a tremendous defensive tackle. Bielma has built that team up front and in the trenches, and it has always been their biggest strengths. I think that it was telling for your question mark of are they physical enough along their offensive line to challenge opposing teams. I think that they showed that. The way that they were able to pave big lanes in the run game proved that they're going to be better equipped for this game. But with that being said, to cut through, and Indiana fans might be thinking I'm like sitting here projecting some sort of an upset and I'm projecting some sort of a big win. I do think that Oregon is going to win this game. I don't know if they cover the 7.5 on FanDuel. I think that if they win, it would probably be a 7-point victory. I don't love the little hook on there. I think that Indiana is able to challenge, and because they have the receivers that they have in Mendoza, if they go down by multiple scores, there is an opportunity for them to pull back into it. But in games like this, blue chip ratio comes up. Blue chip ratio gets talked about all the time. And it is important when you've got two highly motivated squads that are well coached, that have very unique coaches, that are never going to let their teams sleepwalk through a matchup. And if both teams are evenly prepared, evenly motivated, I give the edge to Dan Lanning being the incredible motivator that he is in getting his team prepared. And I have no doubt that they're going to come out swinging. Like I just talked about how they're dominating right now and how quickly they're putting points on the board with that plus 44 point differential in just the first quarter. The talent separation of all the 5 stars that we've hyped up and that we've talked about for this Oregon team will show up. And that is going to help them win this game. That is going to be the separator between these two squads. So I was merely just trying to defend Indiana because I do not think that this is going to be some sort of dominating loss where, and I know you're not claiming that they're going to get blown out. I think that to say that this is a confident victory for Oregon, I think that might be just a little bit too hasty. I think that Indiana is going to be able to fight and stay close. That's it.
I'm super confident. You know what? Lock of the week.
Okay, now you're just trying to be hurtful. Now you're just trying to be hurtful.
Amari Washington. Massive game this week. Massive game this week. I think he pushes around that interior offensive line for Indiana. All right.
Good player.
Dude, sidebar. Okay, hold on. Pause.
He's one of my favorite players in the country right now. I'm not gonna doubt this.
The
He's an
defensive
asshole.
line in this upcoming draft is utterly ridiculous.
It's okay.
No, it's not.
There's some good players.
Reuben Bain, Amari Washington.
If we're adding in edge players, I thought you meant defensive tackles. I thought that was.
Oh no, I meant that's why
the defensive tackles are kind of weak. But no, you're right about D line overall.
Good googly moogly. Good googly moogly. I mean, what do you throw this out there? What do you do with Anthony Hill? Because I got a buddy. I'm just gonna. There are GMs in the NFL who do not want him in the inside. They want a Micah Parsons' ass.
Yeah,
so,
he should be.
Even if you added him, good Lord. All right. I had my little spiel there. Bama versus Missouri this weekend in Como. Joe, this game smells to me. It smells to the highest heavens. I think we have a good old-fashioned strength versus weakness here for one of these teams, and it's a massive matchup for the SEC. How do you see it going down?
This game is so exciting because we have one team that's averaging 292 rush yards per game in Missouri. By the way, on FanDuel, Bama is favored at -3.5 for anyone who wants to bet that on FanDuel. 292 rush yards per game this season for Missouri. Ahmad Hardy is the only player this year to go over 700 rushing yards so far this year. They're also they're the only team that is in the top 5 in total offense and total defense in all of college football. But at the same time, the strengths that they have running the football, they're going up against an Alabama team who is completely different than they were in the first couple of games of the season. Alabama, after Vanderbilt ran for 113 in the first quarter, only gave up 22 rushing yards in the rest of that game. Which version of Alabama shows up? The other part about this, Missouri is only allowing 62 rush yards per game. Alabama finally catches their run game with Jam Miller, and they hit the ground running. And then lastly, Blake, before I throw it to you, the most important thing to me about why I lean Alabama at the current moment, it feels like there's been an ability for some of their opponents, like Lenore Sellers of South Carolina and like Jalen Daniels when they played against Kansas, were able to connect downfield on big passing plays. Right now, that is the biggest strength, and Alabama is the best team in the country at doing that. So we're going to see, Blake, two teams that are going to challenge one another at their various weaknesses with their current strengths. But the question that we have to decide here, and we're going to unpack, is which version of Alabama are we getting, and is Missouri going to be up for the challenge?
Strength versus weaknesses should be the title of this episode, but it won't be because I know you'll come up with something very clever.
Yes.
There are two things I want to bring up here. Just because Vanderbilt got away with the run or got away from the run last week does not change my thought of how leaky you've been in run defense. Joe, they're 87th in the country in run defense. I think some of Pavia's mistakes legitimately hurt Vandy in that second half. And my question is if Vandy on the road can bust off a long run and do some things and have success in the run game, by the way, their best back only had 4 carries, Missouri's not going to get away from Ahmad Hardy. They're not going to get away from Beau Pribula running the football. They're not going to get away from those stable of running backs and trying to lean on you all day. Will you be able to stop it early? Probably if you're Alabama. But they're not going to go away from it. It's their biggest strength that they have. And, Joe, you have the 87th team in the country in Alabama allowing rushing yards. Now, I know a lot of that comes against Florida State. A lot of that comes last week when Vandy had a massive run. But they're still allowing them. And another question I have about Alabama and why our good friends over at FanDuel have that at 3.5. What Bama team shows up on the road? See, last year the problem was, and even the beginning of this year the problem was, instead of when they go and play Georgia, this Alabama team has issues on the road with Kalen DeBoer. I don't think that is a microcosm of what they're going to be as a program under him. How do you answer that bell? And how do you answer that call? Now, let's flip that to the other side when we talk about strengths versus weaknesses. This Missouri secondary, don't you dare look at them stats because they are god-awful. You know how I know that somebody's scared about that Missouri secondary too? Because I've heard Eli Drinkwitz in his last 3 press conferences talk about how he's mad about what their secondary is doing. This ain't the team. This ain't the team. Not with what might be the Heisman frontrunner and Ty Simpson, who makes all of the right decisions. Joe, they let Lenoris Sellers, who did not run until the 3rd quarter, sit in a pocket and pick them apart. Now, listen, I think Lenoris Sellers' game going sky high. The way that he's sitting in the pocket and throwing the football is unfair because of the way he can run it.
Yeah.
You let him sit in the pocket and throw the ball all over you. Brother, Ty Simpson ain't the dude. He's throwing the ball with conviction. He knows he is the most prepared quarterback. There is never a question for me, ever, if Ty Simpson is going to be the most prepared quarterback in college football, because he's going to be. So, with all of that being said, what do we come to a conclusion to? If Alabama's run defense is and will continue to be as leaky as it has been, then Missouri has a chance here. They can control the clock with Ahmad Hardy and the boys. Beau Pribula can have some scrambles and runs that keeps those chains moving. However, Joe, if Alabama is able to get off the field on 3rd down and they're not able to sustain some of these drives, I said it last week, and this one went viral on our Facebook page. It's bombs over Baghdad, and here we go. Because I really don't know if there's a team right now that's going to slow down Ty Simpson the way that he's playing, and it sure as hell is not going to be this Missouri secondary who's got massive amounts of struggles.
So here's the funny thing that I'm thinking about here as you reissue that quote that you gave out on our Facebook page that got a lot of traction. This Missouri team is what a lot of people thought Vanderbilt was. There are a lot of similarities between these two teams, and Missouri is the actual threat. Seriously,
hell yes.
Missouri is the actual threat in the SEC, unlike Vanderbilt, because they've got a quarterback who is pinpoint accurate at the current moment in Pribula. They've got a running back that they're 2 running backs that they're just giving the rock to, and they're both running over everyone. And I love Ahmad Hardy's like a top 4 player in college football that on my list of guys that I freaking love. Can't stop watching his tape because he's just barreling through dudes. Nobody can tackle that kid. And then the other part about this, they're also kind of built like Vanderbilt, where their secondary's shaky and it's had issues and it's given up some big plays. There's 2 sides to this, Blake, that for what helps Alabama win and what helps Missouri win. What helps Alabama win is if Ty Simpson has another signature game, they attack downfield, Ryan Williams has a big play, and Jim Miller starts to get going a little bit. That is how Alabama wins. And I liked how you brought up the whole conversation that we had before the Georgia game of Kalen DeBoer can't win on the road. Beats Georgia on the road. Gets the Vanderbilt win. He is slowly moving past the issues that held back this team. And those issues that held back this team can't show up against this Missouri squad because this Missouri squad has fight. If they get going on the ground, I'd be really worried about Alabama in this matchup because, as you said, they have this ability. Missouri actually has the ability and the willingness to slow the game down if they need to by leaning on that trio of rushers that they have available to them. One thing I will say, though, and this is to give credit to Alabama, and one thing that really caught my attention when I was doing some reading on quotes from some of these coaches. Kane Womack, the Alabama defensive coordinator, said this after the game. I didn't think at the beginning of the Vanderbilt game, as I mentioned, when they gave up 113 rushing yards, I didn't think at the beginning of the Vanderbilt game, as much as we stressed playing physical, playing fast, not playing on our heels, that first drive of the game, I did not think we were playing very aggressive. I did not think we were playing very fast. I told our coaches in those situations, put the iPads down, take your headset off, and let's make sure we get our guys playing real fast and physical. That was a quote I read, and I was like, oh, shit. This is the first time I've seen a coach say, put down the damn technology and let's just make sure these kids go out there and play. And it felt like when I read that, and then I remembered back to the film that I watched on Sunday, it all made sense because after that first quarter, they were just dudes playing free, man. They were just dudes playing free. And I think that right now that is a part of the reason why I lean against Alabama, because the 3 quarters of Alabama against Vanderbilt are a very different team, even though the stats show throughout the entire season they've been struggling.
Well, and see, let's bring that in here. I'm with you there, but to the point you made earlier, and it's the biggest point that I have right here, Missouri is the Coca-Cola version of what Vanderbilt tried to do. They're the Coca-Cola version. They're not the Dr. Pibb version. Okay? Pribula is a better athlete. By far.
And a better passer.
He's got a better arm. He's more accurate. Containing him is going to be a massive deal here. But see, the problem is when you think you got him contained, you don't really have him contained. And I like the way early in the season, Missouri, when they go down to Kansas and they get punched in the mouth, all they do is they don't panic. They rally right back. They don't get out of their game plan. They continue to do what they do, and they control things. The question is can they control it against Alabama? And I'm telling you, Joe, the reason that line is so small, and I say small, but it's 3.5, it's because there is some thought out there from people that Missouri's going to be able to control some of this clock and run the football. At the end of the day, though, when it's all said and done, there's 2 ways. The way both teams win is simply by Ty Simpson continues to do what they're doing, or he's doing. They still find some success. They're not great. I mean, Jam Miller ran for 136. Okay, but outside of that, Joe, they ran for 140. I mean, it's not really like they had massive amounts of success outside of Jam Miller, not that you necessarily need it. But I just think that they're going to continue to roll, and their weakness, Missouri's weakness, to me, feels bigger than what I think Alabama's is in run defense. But here's a question that I also throw out there. What has Eli Drinkwitz and the boys been able to cook up and conjure during a bye week? What did they see against Alabama and Vandy that Alabama's not going to be able to see on film that they're going to be able to attack, and they don't have an answer for? And I think that that's what makes it so intriguing. I really think that I know we were talking about Oregon and Indiana earlier. I think this is the game that's actually going to be a little bit closer than maybe people, when they look at both of these programs, think that it is, just because of the way that Missouri can control the clock and how Pribula can scramble and make things happen with his legs. But when it's all said and done and you turn out the lights, I just think Ty Simpson in this past game's able to continue to expose that secondary, and it's going to lead him to a victory here.
I think that one of the pieces that you just brought up of like what could they potentially cook up, and I'm very specific. I very specifically want to acknowledge defensively, because there have not been a lot of teams over the past few weeks on this stretch where Ty Simpson has been unbelievable and where we have talked so highly of Ty Simpson. No one has successfully gotten after him because the Alabama offensive line has done such a tremendous job of protecting him.
Especially after Florida State.
Yes.
Especially after that.
So now you're coming into this game with one of the best pass rush duos in the SEC with Zion Young, Damon Wilson, and you've got a really solid interior defensive line with a rotation of players that have contributed at a very high level. Do those guys get home? Those guys have to get home to give a little bit of a cushion to the corners in the secondary that we talked about that's been struggling a little bit.
Let me pause.
Yeah, go ahead.
With that being said, would you try to heat him up and say, listen, our secondary is not going to be able to stop him anyway. Why don't we try to heat Ty Simpson up?
I think that would be the approach. Yeah, and I don't know what their typical blitz rate is, but I think that should be the approach. I don't think anyone's done a good job of flustering Ty Simpson, and he's been
outside of Florida State.
And he's been so freaking composed. And I think that the Florida State game is the evidence of, if you go after him, what can you produce? What kind of challenges can you produce? My last bit, though, that I have here for this game, before I let you close things out, and you alluded to it, I'm impressed by how both teams have handled adversity. I'm impressed by how both teams, late in some games where it looked like they could have dropped, the South Carolina and the Kansas game for Missouri. And for Alabama, things got a little spicy late against Georgia, and things weren't looking good early against Vanderbilt. I trust both of these teams to finish the year really strong, because I see two teams that battle through adversity incredibly well. And whoever battles through adversity the most in this close game ultimately is going to be the winner.
Just throwing this out there. If Missouri does get an upset, and I'm not even saying that it would be a massive upset, because it would be because of brand name.
Yeah.
You do know that we're staring in week 8 down the barrel of an SEC gun of the SEC championship being some form or version of Texas A&M, Ole Miss, or Missouri.
That's insane if that does happen.
Well, hold on. Joe, that's where we'd be. So just
I just find it hard to believe that actually comes to fruition, though. Like, there's going to be one recurring.
I do too. No team in the last 2 decades, well, besides Auburn and LSU, have won the SEC not named Georgia, Bama, and mainly it's been LSU being the third team. And when you look at Florida, and I guess to some extent, I think they had one in there. I do wonder if, because it's against Georgia, you're coming off a bye week. I don't know. Can Kalen DeBoer kind of right this wrong about away games with not named Georgia? That will be a question. Can they continue to find the run game will be another question for me, too, when we look at this game. All right. Let's wrap this up here. Joe, the Red River shootout, Texas versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma coming off a pretty impressive win versus Kent State. Texas falling to Florida on the road in the swamp. I know what you're going to say here. Is John Mateer playing? But we got to kind of move around this because nobody really knows on a Monday when we do this video. When you look at Texas versus Oklahoma, how do you see this one playing out?
Blake, right now Texas is favored at -2.5 on FanDuel. And
so crazy.
I don't know how they are after the way that these two teams have played. Michael Hawkins steps in. He was a starter for a period of time last year. So this is not a completely new kid. And if anything, I have evidence of Michael Hawkins playing better than Arch has played so far in the same, basically the same amount of sample size of starts for these two kids. Besides that point, Blake, this game very, very, very simply is defined by which offensive line plays better. Very simple, because both teams have very talented defensive lines. Both teams have very talented front sevens that are aggressive and they're attacking. Right now, Oklahoma is 53rd in sacks allowed, 95th in tackles for loss allowed. They gave up 3 sacks against Kent State, a Kent State team that only had 4 sacks through the first 4 weeks.
Insane.
Inversely, yeah, I know, that's a crazy stat. Inversely, we watched the Texas offensive line implode against Florida. And I went back and watched that tape last night, and the 6 sacks look so much worse than I really realized they were from when I watched the game live. Like, I really think that Oklahoma is going to win this game. And it really all comes down to the fact that Brent Venables is in his bag. We talked about this. It was the greatest coaching adjustment of the offseason for him to decide that he wanted to call defensive plays. As soon as I saw that and that was announced and we talked about it, that was a green light for me to register this defense is going to be elite. I'm a big R. Mason Thomas fan. That whole unit is living through the identity of Brent Venables, the chaos creator. What we just saw Florida do, the success that they had, oh boy. I think that this Oklahoma team is going to get more than 6 sacks. Like, very, very simply, watching that damn Florida game back another time, the amount of pressure that came up the middle the second that Arch Manning had the ball in his hands. It was troubling.
That's why I said last night, just for what it's worth, when we broke them down, Joe, why I didn't really give Arch a lot of hell. I mean, did he make some bad decisions? Yeah, and no one's trying to say he didn't. Brother, the interior pressure on him was absolutely insane. To your point, Joe, this is the number one total defense in the country is Oklahoma. They're fifth in the country in defense and rush defense. They're number one on third down defensively, and it's not literally remotely close. Texas would have to go 12 for 12 against Oklahoma, and that be the ball game for them to fall outside of being first on third down. That's how dominant they've been defensively. Now, Joe, Oklahoma's played Michigan. They've played Auburn. They've played some teams who offensively have had a lot of struggles. They're going up against another one. I got to ask you a wild question. Is this the best one they've seen, though? Because I think Texas still can do some different things more than Auburn can. I'm not saying Oklahoma defensively is not legit because they are very legit. But I do wonder, I really do wonder if this is ironically the best offensive team that they've seen. Now, you can say, well, Michigan, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree, but you got a third-time starter in Bryce Underwood going into Norman. And I don't know how to quantify that. What I would say here is I do think that FanDuel and why people have asked that question feel like Texas is going to respond at a high level. The question becomes here too, does John Mateer play? Because if John Mateer plays, Joe, I got to be real with you.
Automatic. It's all like there's no even question Oklahoma wins if Mateer plays. There's no question.
That's where my brain goes. Okay. And you're going to have to go throughout the week to see if he isn't, who knows. But this just smells like a massively horrible recipe for Texas. How do you respond after last weekend of what you did at Florida? It's not like Oklahoma has a worse defense of what you just saw on the road. By the way, I don't care what any Texas or Oklahoma fan tells me. I know you're playing in Dallas. This game's on the road again. You got to travel. So something tells me that because it smells so bad, Texas might find a way.
I can't believe you're finding a way to you can't beat the Oklahoma hater allegations, Blake.
Well, hold on. I didn't say I was picking them.
I know.
All I said was they might. So how would they? How would they? I'm with you on the offensive line. If Kent State can get that amount of pressure on you, John Mateer or no John Mateer, this Texas front seven is still this Texas front seven. And I do wonder if this game is a 10, 13-point game, 13 to 10 in the fourth quarter, if Texas can't find a drive here. Joe, I think this one's low scoring. I am banging the under.
Okay, yes. Obviously on that, we're taking the under for this game. I'm going to check what the under is in a quick second. Obviously on that, I think if Hawkins is playing, especially him taking the under in this game, Hawkins is not the same level of improviser as Mateer that he's able to outplay the poor offensive line performances. I think that if they're the one inkling of a possibility, inkling's a little negative. If Texas wins this game, the way that I see it happening is because Arch does what DJ Lagway just did to them. Is there a possibility in a world where we check out and we think this team's a mess, they can't do anything right, quarterback's not playing well, and then suddenly they do just enough to eke out a win? They get just one or two big plays because Sark realizes we got to start hot. We got to really, really funnel all of our attention into this game. Otherwise, everyone is going to really start putting the heat on us. But here's just the real important thing that I'm going to continue to harp on.
But
I think that as good as Texas's defense has been, Oklahoma's defense is better.
Oh, I agree with that. There's no doubt about it. But
Without a doubt. And I think that they're going to be able to completely smother this Oklahoma or this Texas offensive line. I think that they're going to get completely after him. I think Arch has not responded well to pressure. And more importantly, going up against a defensive coordinator who thrives on creating panic in the minds of the quarterbacks that he's facing. I am very fearful what is going to happen to Arch in this game. I think that it is going to be a tough day. And I think that he is going to have a lot of pressure. He is going to need to go Superman mode to get away from pressure. And they're going to need to find their non-existent run game. Otherwise, it absolutely will be a long day for Texas. Don't think it's going to be a blowout. But I think that Oklahoma is going to be able to do enough to win a close, very, very low-scoring game. I have a very strong feeling that this is going to be an ugly game with a lot of turnovers and a lot of mistakes, a whole lot of defense. The one team that makes the least amount of mistakes wins, plain and simple.
Want to throw this your way. A couple of things before we get out of here. We were sent this today by one of our producers. Sark is 5-18 versus top 10 opponents. John Tweet Sports, who followed us, he does a great job on what they do too. He put out the stat is Sark the SEC version of James Franklin.
I think he's better than James Franklin.
I do too, but he's 5-18 against top 10 opponents. I got to be real with you. That's what kind of carries me over. I don't know if they can find an offense. I think Oklahoma is going to just find a way here. But what scares me is, does Ryan Wingo find himself? Because Cam Coleman did, and Jackson Arnold stinks. He stinks. You know, Oklahoma fans, you know how I know he stinks? You canned his ass. So don't come in here and tell me that he doesn't stink. He stinks. And I think Arch can make the throws that Jackson Arnold couldn't. Want to know how it gets close? Let Ryan Wingo go on a fade route like Cam Coleman did and let him actually come close to landing it. Hot take. I think Ryan Wingo finds himself this week. I think Arch finds him. And I think that when you go in so much bump and run man-to-man coverage against athletes like that, you get roasted. I think that is what's going to help Texas in a rivalry situation, but I just don't know if they're going to, like you said, find a running game, nor do they even want to try. Against Florida, they didn't even try. And Joe, you have one of the top run defenses in the country. It's not like you can find it. So I'm going to go Oklahoma with you here, even without John Mateer. But Joe, I think this is a 3-point game. I think we're lining up for a field goal here at the end to win it for both sides, and we'll see what happens.
I'm taking on FanDuel Oklahoma money line at plus 125, and I'm taking the under at minus 115 odds, 42.5 points. I think it's going to be low scoring.
They ain't scoring 40.
There's going to be 4 turnovers combined between these two teams. If there's a prop bet for that, I wonder if I can get a prop bet on that.
They ain't nobody scoring 40. They ain't combined scoring 40. Watch teams score 40 plus.
I know that, like, with our luck, that everyone just unloads the clip, and who knows. It sucks that this game could have totally been Mateer versus Arch, and it could have been like a real shootout. And here we are.
Look, he still might get it. Who knows? We're taping this on Monday. Who knows? We don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We got a couple super chats.
We got some super chats in here before we bail. Joe hates with a $2 super chat from Marshall. Joe hates Ohio State, Texas A&M, and Oregon.
I don't hate any of those teams. I don't. I've said this before. There is one team in college football I hate, and one that I closely hate a little bit. I hate USC as a Notre Dame fan, and I used to really hate Michigan. But because Notre Dame doesn't play Michigan that often anymore, it's just a strong disdain towards them. So if anyone wants to, I put myself on the table. I don't hate any of those other teams. You got nothing wrong with them.
Texas A&M people think I hate them too, so you're in the same boat here. Yeah. Elks with a $2 super chat. He says, you guys should do confidence picks on the games.
Not a bad idea.
I don't mind that because, look, we're betting against these games for FanDuel's sake, against the games that nobody would truly bet on outside of money line. Let's just be real. Everybody bets money lines on games me and you are trying to pick the spread against. So I'm with you there, Alex. He also sends a $5 super chat. Says Colin Simmons winning Freshman of the Year over Jeremiah Smith was awful, deplorable, and fireable. Simmons has been on a milk carton this year.
Wait, what? Wait, I don't even remember that happening. I feel like it was such a foregone conclusion that Jeremiah Smith was so good that nobody. When did that happen? Elk, send me in the Discord because I don't even remember that. To that point, Colin Simmons is 1.5 sacks this year. Excuse me, has 1.5 sacks this year. So they have not played well, or he has not played well.
Yeah, it's not all on him either. They look off.
The whole team does.
I got to be real with you. Here's my thought on Texas before we leave. Mm-hmm. It looks like that you read your own news clippings during the offseason and you didn't prepare.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
See y'all tomorrow, man. Y'all have a great night. Peace.